Here's a few more problems. On this problem, it says, what is 1 divided by 1/8? Well, again, when you're dividing fractions, you reciprocate the second fraction and multiply. So the reciprocal of 1/8 is actually 8 over 1, or just 8. So this is 1 times 8, or 8. So 1 divided by 1/8 is 8. If you add or subtract fractions, you have to get a common denominator. So here's a problem that already has a common denominator. 3/4 minus 1/4. Just bring the denominator along, that's 4, and 3 minus 1 is 2, so we get 2/4, and 2/4 reduces down to 1/2. Here's another problem that does not have a common denominator. And again, whenever you add or subtract fractions, you have to get a common denominator. So this is problem 7/12 plus 2/18. Well, the common denominator, what number will both 12 and 18 go into? Well, one way to do this is take your larger number and start going up multiples of that larger number and see if the other number goes into it. Well, 18 times 1 is 18, and 12 doesn't go to 18. 18 times 2 is 36, and 12 does go into 36, so 36 is your lowest common denominator. Another way to get a lowest common denominator, if you're having trouble with doing it like I just did, is to break the denominators down into their primes. 12 is equal to 2 times 2 times 3. 18 is the same as 2 times 3 times 3. And to get your lowest common denominator, take each one of these numbers, like for example, let's go with 2's to begin with. And we say which one of these rows has the most amount of 2's in it. Well, this row does, and how many 2's are in it? 2. So we need 2 2's. Of both of these rows, which one has the most amount of 3's? This one does. So we'll need 2 3's, and then the lowest common denominator, you can get that by just multiplying those together, and that's 36. So that's what we have here. Now at this point, what you need to do is say how many times does 12 go into 36? Well, 12 goes into 36 3 times, and 3 times 7 is 21. So let me catch up here a second. That's 21. And 18 goes into 36 2 times, and 2 times 2 is 4. And then at this point, it's just a matter of adding up these numbers. Let me go over here to put my answer. And I get 21 plus 4 is 25. And the denominator is 36. So I get 25/36. And see if that would reduce, but that does not reduce, so that would be the answer to that problem, 25/36. Here's a problem, 7 over 105 minus 2/18. Well, again, we have to get a common denominator anytime we're adding or subtracting, so we need to get a common denominator between 105 and 18. Now, I can't do this in my head, so what I'm going to need to do is break these numbers down into primes. 105, well, 5 goes into 105 because it ends with a 5 or a 0. If you take 5 into 105, it goes 21 times, and 21 breaks down into 3 times 7. 18, well, 2 goes into 18 9 times, and 9 is 3 times 3. And now to find your lowest common denominator, we'll go to each number one at a time, and we'll say how many are there in each row. Like for example, let's start off with 2. Well, there's 1 2 in this row, there's no 2's in that row, so the most amount of 2's in any one row is 1, 1 2. So I need 1 2. How many 3's are in each row? Well, 2 3's here, 1 3 here, so the most amount of 3's in any one row or any one number there is 2. So we need 2 3's. Let's go to 5's. There's 1 5 up here, no 5 down there. So the most amount of 5's is 1 5. So we need 1 5. And the same thing is true with 7's. We have 1 7 in that row, no 7's in this row, so we have 1 7 is the most amount of 7's in any one row. So the lowest common denominator is this big number when we multiply this whole thing together. And let's see what we get here. Well, I know 2 times 5 is 10. 10 times 9 is 90. And I know 9 times 7 is 63, so this would be 630, believe it or not, is your common denominator, 630. Okay, so let's go over here and write that as a common denominator, 630, and we'll write that under each one of these. 105 goes into 630 how many times? Well, 1 goes into 6 times, and that actually will do it. 105 goes into 630 6 times, and 6 times 7 is 42. And then over here, again, we have the same denominator, 630. Now, how many times does 18 go into 630? Well, let's do this. Let's look over at this common denominator here a second where we have it broke up into its primes. If I take 18 out of that, which is 2 times 3 times 3, that leaves me with just the 5 times 7, which is 35. So 18 goes into 630 35 times, and 35 times 2 is 70. Now I'm going to end up with a negative number on this problem as the answer, because now that I have a common denominator, I can go ahead and subtract those two numbers up on top. So again, the common denominator is 630, and 42 minus 70. Well, 70 minus 42, I know we're not doing that, we're doing 42 minus 70, but 70 minus 42 is 28. Now what's going to happen here is, since we're subtracting a larger number than what we have to begin with, we're subtracting 70 off of 42, well, we'll have a negative 28 over 630. Okay, again, we're subtracting 70 off of 42, and that gives us a negative 28. Now, you can reduce this because 2 goes into 28 14 times, so I get a negative 14 over, well, 2 goes into 630 315 times, and I don't believe it reduces down any farther than that, because the only factors of 14 are 2 and 7, and 2 doesn't go into 315 because it's not an even number, and 7, if you think about it, it might go in there. Let's see, 7 goes into 31 4 times, with 3 left over, which gives me 35, so I think it might reduce again. Let's try this. In fact, I'm almost positive it does, since 630, the common denominator, had a 7 involved with it right there. So 7 goes into negative 14 negative 2 times, and 7 goes into 315. Well, 7 goes into 31 4 times, with 3 left over, and 7 goes into that 35 5 times. And we could double check this and see if 7 times 45 is 315, and it is. So this is what this problem reduces down here, negative 2 45ths. Okay, last problem over here, 3 1/5 minus 1 2/7. Again, you got to switch this over to improper fractions. So 5 times 3 is 15, 15 plus 1 is 16/5. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 2 makes 9/7. Now we got to get a common denominator, and the common denominator on this problem would be 35. This one we can just look at. These are two prime numbers. Just multiply them together and you get the least common denominator. 5 goes into 35 7 times. 7 times 16, if you work that out, I'll tell you what, let's do that over here. 16 times 7, well, that's 6 times 7 is 42, carry your 4 here, and 7 times 1 is 7, 7 plus 4 is 11. So that's actually 112 is what this would be right here, 112. And 7 goes into 35 5 times, and 5 times 9 is 45. And so now we have the common denominator, it's 35, and then all we have to do is subtract the numbers up on top. Well, 112 minus 45, let's do that off the side here. 112 minus 45, well, we're going to have to borrow from here, make this down to a 0. We got 12 minus 5 is 7, and then that would be 10 minus 4, which is 6. So I get 67/35. Now, check and see if that reduces. The only numbers that go into 35 are 5 and 7, and 5 doesn't go into 67. And 7 times 9 is 63, so 7 also won't go into the 67. So the answer to this problem is 67/35. And that will wrap it up.